Okay, I wanted to talk through a few things with you guys today. I'm going to work on the Denim Patchwork Tote. It is a fairly simple construction, so I just wanted to show you guys how I go through the steps. I usually prep all of my pieces first, all the little pieces for the bag, and all the big pieces. So a couple things here. So I've cut out my two panels, my front and the back of my bag. This is the bag that we're making. And here on mine, I have the craft text paper that feels like leather, looks like leather. You could, of course, use fabric as well, a quilted piece of fabric. And then, as noted in the pattern, I've used these amazing leather handles that I love. But again, you could 100% make fabric straps. So I'll show you guys how to do that as an alternative. But that's the bag. That's about the size of it in terms for perspective with my hands. So for it, you will need the two pieces following the pattern. And then you will need to cut your binding that you're going to bind the top of the bag. So I've already made my binding so that it's all ready for me to go. Regular binding, just like you would a quilt. Basically regular, folded in half, ready to use. And then these little strap tabs. So there's 4 pieces of fabric that you cut the size in the pattern. You fold it over, and then you put the piece, the template on top of it. I've just used some freezer paper here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut that to that size, and I'll do the same thing with all 4 of them. So that'll be my shape. And then I'll show you guys how I make those tabs in a second. But basically, this is a super simple little accent. So I'm going to do that with all 4 of them because I need 4. And where they are in the bag is they are right here. This is basically that tab. And it's what the D-ring, this is called a D-ring right here. And your little, your clip will go through. Okay. So that's the only accent piece in this particular bag, which is why I'm starting with it, because it's really simple. And next I want to show you guys and talk a little bit about the craft text paper. So this is a piece that it's a little bit bigger than what I need. I've just cut it off of the bolt. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to go run it through my sink on hot water, and then I'm going to crumple it all up, and then I'm going to come back and show you guys what it looks like. Okay, so I've literally run it in hot water in the sink and crumpled it up. As you can see, it's still wet. My hands are wet. Crumpled it up as much as I can. So this is what it will look like. I like to crumple it up several times so that I can just get as much of the wrinkles in there. And then I'm going to throw it in the dryer and dry it so that it's... ideally, it's still damp, but if you dry it all the way to the end, you can still spray it a little bit with water when you're pressing it flat at the end. So what you're creating is basically texture. As you can see, it just, it's paper, but miraculously it looks like leather. So I'm going to go do that and go run it through the dryer, and then I'll come back and show you guys what I do with it next. Okay, I'm back from the washing machine. And I want you to see, or from the dryer, see what my craft text looks like. So do you see how it has all that great texture on it that looks old and weathered? And I did dry it a little bit too long, so it's completely dry and it's not flat. So what I'm going to do now is you could just spray it with a little bit of water, but I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of my fig flatter because it's what I have and I love the scent. Spraying it basically just makes it a little bit more pliable. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go just press it with my iron, just enough so that it's basically flat and easy to cut and work with. And then that will be ready to go. The other thing I've done is I've made my tabs. So this is the first step. You're going to sew around your tab like this. And these little pieces sewing all the way out is a special little trick that for when you turn it inside out, that helps. It helps the little end pieces to fold, the little open pieces to fold inside really easily. So that's already been turned. I've already turned this with my Where's my favorite little pressing tool? Oh, hold on a sec. I left it at the ironing machine. At the iron. So I use my favorite little pressing tool, and when I pull it out, I press into the corners, on all of the corners, and then because of those little side seams, this little piece just pops right in there. And then I have this, and then I'm gonna stitch all the way around it. Just a top stitch. I used, I could use a blue thread if I wanted it to disappear, but I actually wanted you guys to be able to see it. So I used kind of a taupe thread for this part, and where it ends and begins will be the back part of my tab. So when I put it through my D-ring, it should be bigger on purpose. Then I'm going to find where my little piece is, and I'm going to be sure that I'm putting that on the back where I'm putting it on the bag. And I'm just going to kind of squish it in to the center so that it's just a little bit wrinkled up here. I do that on purpose. I like the way that that feels, like it's fitting in there like that. And then I'm going to go back to my machine, and I'm going to just do a line straight across here. So this is basically ready to go together in the shape that I want it. So when it comes time later on, I'm literally just adding it to my bag. Okay, so I'm going to do that with all 4 of my tabs. And let me go press this a tiny bit and show you what it looks like once it's all ready to use. Okay, so I've now trimmed down my piece, and it's flat. I basically pressed it with an iron. As in, you can see all of the little wrinkles are still there, but it's a flat piece that I can work with just like I would work with a piece of fabric. And so what I'm going to do next, I did want to note that in this pattern, you're cutting the lining fabric separate. And in the instructions, you are basically, hold on, let me take things out of my bag. You guys hear all the things dropping out of my bag. You're sewing it, the lining, all the way across the bag, over the bottom part, and all the way up, so that to create a nice finish in here. It's a little bit dirty in here because I've been using this bag for about a year, almost every day. But I'm going to do this one a tiny bit different, and you can kind of pick what you want to do. But because I hand quilted this one myself, just on my regular machine, as you can see, with my favorite little zigzag stitch. And so I set it up like it is in the pattern, and then I zigzagged it all the way to the end. I did one single line. I skipped the part with the craft text, and then I continued up the back. But I had my friend Susan quilt up a bunch of fabric here for me for this this bag sew along for us, so that I had a lot of this fabric already done and ready. And so it already has a backing on it and a front. So instead of putting on another lining inside, which would waste, I just don't need it because I had it pre-quilted. What I'm going to do is I'm literally just going to sew this to the bottom. Let me see if I can move that up a little bit so you can see it. To the bottom. And then I'm going to sew the back to the bottom like this. What that's going to do is, instead of giving me a piece inside that's where I'm doing lining, I'm just going to have a raw seam there inside where these two join that I'm then just going to bind to finish it off. But this is already quilted for me, so I've already got a piece that's already done and quilted in the back. And the next step is basically sewing this together into one long piece. So let's do that next. Okay, so there's a couple, three reminders of working with craft text. One, you don't ever want to use pins when using it because it will perforate, make little holes. So I always use binding clips. That's one. Two, when sewing with it, I elongate my stitch a little bit. So if you can see there, my stitch is a little bit longer than it normally would be. I can't tell you exactly on there. My machine's not calibrated to tell me what the number is, but just a little bit longer than what you would normally do. And 3, on the ends, don't backstitch, because again, you're going to perforate it. Take your threads, so make sure you leave yourself threads that are long enough to tie, and then just basically tie yourself some little knots on the end to secure that thread. You can knot it 3 or 4 times. That's 3, 4 for safety, and then just leave tiny little tails. So I would do that on all ends. So those are the 3 things: longer stitch, binding clips instead of pins, and tying off the ends. Those are 3 little tricks for using Craftex. Once I have secured all of that together, I'm going to fold this bag in half. So I'm going to line up the ends, and I'm going to fold my Craftex in half. That's going to be on the bottom of my bag, and it's going to help me make my corners in the next step. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to make sure that this is well lined up here. Once I've finished off everything, actually I take that back. I forgot a step. Once I have that secured, and this has been pressed out towards the fabric away from the bottom, I'm going to run 2 top stitches along the fabric portion right next to each other. And this is all in the pattern, but right next to each other in order to secure that, not on the Craftex side, on this side. And I'm going to do that on both that side of the bottom and on this side of the bottom. And that's all I'm going to do to secure that part there. And then I'm going to fold it over in half, and I'm going to find where these touch one another exactly. There's really only one spot on this whole bag that you want to make sure that you have coming together, because it will be the side of your bag, and you want those to be exactly right there. So I will clip that, and I will check it when I'm sewing later. Again, I'll slow down in this area, and I'll be really careful to make sure that I have those seams touching. Other than that, it's all folded up. I'm going to sew from the top, back stitching up here a little bit. It's no problem to do that on the fabric, and I'm going to go all the way down. If I had done this the way that it is in the pattern, with just the binding separate without a pre-quilted piece, then this would just all be binding, and I would have quilted it, and it would have gone all the way over this and to the other side. So that step I got to omit in this part since I had pre-quilted it all, but it would have been basically your fabric on the outside, then your fleece, and then your lining. A little quilt sandwich is described in the pattern again for you. But I'm doing a little cheater method with this one since I had these lovely pieces of patchwork pre-quilted for me. So what I'm going to do is finish that up and then show you guys the next step. Okay, so I now have an envelope. I've sewn up the sides, regular stitch, and then I elongated it for this section. And then I have just bound the sides so that I have a nice finished. I decided I wasn't going to worry about binding this. I'm just going to leave it as is. If I really wanted a finished edge, I could have also bound this before I bound and sewn the sides. But I decided, didn't matter. It's the inside of my bag. It's the bottom. And so this is basically bound on this side, and I'm going to hand stitch this on the sides later on. But for right now, we're ready to go to create a corner. So what you do when you create a corner of a bag, if you're not bag proficient, or if this is your first one, you basically have to find the bottom, and wherever you're going to draw a line, and it depends on where you're going to do how big your bottom's going to be. So all that information is in your pattern. But what I would do here is I'm going to open up the bag, and it takes a little bit of manipulation with the Craftex. If you're using fabric, it's a little bit easier. And I'm going to basically find my corner. I'm going to make sure that my corner, if I have a spot to line it up on my mat to double check that it's a 90 degree, I usually do that, but that one is. And I'm going to basically make sure that the seam, not the part that's extra here, but the actual seam that I've sewn is running down the middle of my corner. And so what I'm going to do is whatever is the size of my overall corner, I'm going to make sure that it's the same from here to here as it is from here to here. And then I'm going to find that line. I'm going to make sure that my center is centered. And then I'm going to draw a line, which is going to be my stitch line. Now, if for some reason it's not in the center and I'm measuring, and let's say I've got 2 inches over here and I've got 2.5 over here. What I'm going to do is I'm then basically going to put my hand, one hand inside, and I'm just going to keep moving this over one way or the other to make sure that it is actually centered. Okay, so I'm going to do that on this side. And this is all working on page 5 of your pattern. I'm going to find my line. I'm going to mark it. I'm going to sew on it, and then I'm going to trim off the end. And then I'm going to flip my bag over. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the other side. Center it. Make sure I have a good triangle. Find my line according to the pattern. Sew and trim off the extra. Okay? That's the next step. Okay, so I just wanted you guys to see what this looks like. I found my corner line, and I've measured and marked it from here to here and from here to here. I've clipped it in place so that it doesn't shift. I've done the same exact thing on the back, on the other side. Those are my 2 corners. And now I'm going to sew on the line and trim off the excess. All right, ready? Let's go. Okay, so I sewed on that line, trimmed the little piece off, sewed it together, and instead of binding this, because it's craft text and I just wanted to be done faster, I decided just to give it a little zigzag edge. For me, that's perfectly fine for this kind of a bag, and I didn't need it to be finished anymore, and a zigzag on this side. So once I was done with that, then I'm just going to press out my bottom. If this was fabric, you wouldn't necessarily have to do this because it would kind of fall into place. But with the craft text, kind of want to shape it a little bit. And then I'm going to turn the whole thing right sides out. So all that we have left to do on this bag is to add the little tabs and to bind the top. For right now, I'm just going to work my craft text out a little bit with my hand and my corners on one side, and then all the way across, and then to the other side, and then those corners. And if you need a tool to do that, I would use this sometimes in the corners. I don't want to puncture anything, so I would just be careful, but it does do a great job, as you can see, of getting my shape and my corners out. So I would continue to basically work with it until I've gotten my whole bag bottom folded out. For right now, you can just see that there's my bag. That's my bottom. I'm going to work this a little bit more and then come back. Okay, bottom is done, pushed out, ready to stand up on its own, if you can see that. I love it. You absolutely could do all of this with a caramel fabric. I think it would look great as well if you don't want to work with the craft text. So all that's left for me to do is to bind the top exactly like I would bind a quilt. What I would do is I would pick which side I like better. If it's this side or if it's this side, pick whichever is my front side, and don't start the binding on that part. Start it on the other side, bind it all the way around the way that you would a quilt. At that point, all that's left to do is to take your little prepared tabs with the D-rings, place them according to the instructions in the pattern, and it tells you exactly how far over and how far down to do that. And you're going to do one on each side, and then you're going to repeat it on the other side of your bag. This part here is separate, so you're basically just going to add those according to the instructions, add it here, add it to the two other sides, and then you're either going to clip in your leather handles or you're going to make handles, which I will show that as a part of another bag that has fabric handles. So if you want to make your own handles for this particular bag, then you'll want to refer to the video tutorial on Kimberly's Sack Revisited, which will come next week. So, but you can get all the way to this point if you want without that other one. So I hope you enjoyed watching. This is my old used bag, and now I'm gonna have a new one. I wonder if perhaps I might gift this one to my sister. Hopefully that was all helpful to you guys, and maybe it answered some of your bag questions. Next week we will be doing either Bag Lady or Kimberly's Sack Revisited, so join me again for another bag making video. Thanks guys.